The night began with a sound that no parent ever forgets, the sharp, panicked cry of a child struggling to breathe. It sliced through the thin walls of a small apartment and lodged itself deep in a single father's chest, where fear already lived like a second heart. He had learned long ago to wake at the smallest noise, to read every breath, every pause, every change in rhythm, and when he saw his daughter's skin pale beneath the flickering kitchen light, when her lips trembled and her eyes searched his face for reassurance, he didn't think. He moved because when the world gives you one person to protect, hesitation becomes a luxury you can't afford. Life had never been generous to him. It had taken his wife slowly, cruelly, and without apology, leaving him with a toddler, hospital bills, and a silence that rang louder than any argument ever had. He learned to survive in pieces, working nights, sleeping in fragments, smiling when exhaustion pressed so hard it felt like drowning. His name didn't matter much anymore. He was known mostly as the man who fixed things, who showed up early, who left late, who never complained. In offices with marble floors and glass walls, he blended into the background like furniture, invisible, replaceable, easy to overlook. That was how she saw him too. She noticed him first as an inconvenience. The quiet man in worn clothes who took too long in the elevator, who smelled faintly of antiseptic and cheap coffee, who kept his eyes down as if the world were something fragile he didn't want to break. She was everything. He was not polished, confident, born into a life where mistakes could be softened by money and apologies were handled by assistants. As the daughter of a powerful CEO, she had grown up learning that time was valuable and patience optional. When she mocked him, it wasn't cruelty in her mind. It was reflex, a habit formed by years of being at the top, where people below existed mostly as obstacles. He heard her words, he always did, but he had learned something else too. When you carry enough weight, you don't have the energy to throw it back. So he swallowed the shame, nodded, stepped aside, and returned to the quiet rhythm of his life. Each morning he packed a small lunchbox with a handwritten note his daughter couldn't yet read but liked to keep anyway. Each night he counted coins on the table, calculating groceries, rent, medicine. His dreams were modest and fragile, easily broken by reality, so he kept them small. Safety, health. One more day. The call came on a morning that smelled like rain and metal. His daughter needed a procedure he couldn't afford to delay, and the hospital corridors felt colder than usual. The kind of cold that settles into your bones. While he waited, his phone buzzed with a notification from work. A request. Urgent. A hospital nearby needed blood immediately. A rare type. They were calling anyone registered who might be a match. He looked at his daughter through the glass, tubes tracing fragile lines across her small body, and he didn't hesitate. He signed the form with hands that shook, not from fear, but from something closer to hope. He didn't know who the blood was for. He didn't ask. In his world, helping without questions had become instinct. The nurse explained the risks in a calm voice, the kind trained to sound reassuring even when nothing is guaranteed. He nodded. He always nodded. Pain was familiar. Fear was familiar. What mattered was that someone needed him. And for once, the need was immediate, undeniable. As the blood left his body, he felt lightheaded, the room tilting slightly, as if the world itself were reminding him of how close he always lived to the edge. He closed his eyes and thought of his daughter's laugh, the way it filled spaces that grief had hollowed out. He imagined her running someday, strong and unafraid, never knowing how many pieces of him had been spent to keep her alive. That thought steadied him more than any medicine could. Across the hospital, behind a curtain of machines and muted alarms, the CEO's daughter lay unconscious. The woman who had rolled her eyes at the quiet man in the elevator was now stripped of titles and power, reduced to a fragile human body in crisis. An accident had come fast and violent, the kind that doesn't care who you are or what your last name means. Blood loss. Complications. Panic, disguised as efficiency as doctors moved quickly. Voices low but urgent. When the transfusion began, it felt like a miracle in motion. Numbers stabilized. Color returned. Life, quiet and stubborn, pushed back against the dark. Her father stood nearby, a man used to commanding rooms, now powerless in the face of beeping machines. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to wait with nothing but hope. Days later, when she awoke, the world looked different. Pain has a way of sharpening truth, of stripping away the noise. She listened as doctors explained what had happened, how close it had been, how a stranger's blood had made the difference between loss and survival. A stranger, the word echoed in her mind. Someone had given without expecting anything. Someone she would never meet, or so she thought. It wasn't until she insisted on seeing the donor registry, until she followed a quiet pull she couldn't explain, that she saw his name. It sat there plainly, without decoration or importance. And with it came a memory she hadn't thought mattered. The elevator. The look on his face, the way he stepped aside, as if he had already accepted being less. Recognition hit harder than the accident ever had. She found him sitting in the same hospital, exhaustion carved into his posture, watching over his daughter with the devotion of someone who knows how easily everything can disappear. He looked thinner, paler, weaker, and yet, in that moment, he felt larger than anyone she had ever known. She understood then that strength doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wear expensive clothes or speak loudly. Sometimes it shows up quietly, gives everything it has, and asks for nothing in return. Shame is a heavy thing when it finally arrives. It settled in her chest as she watched him brush his daughter's hair back with trembling care. All the moments she had dismissed him replayed in her mind, sharper now, impossible to excuse. She had believed kindness was optional, something you could choose when convenient. Lying in that hospital bed had taught her otherwise. He didn't know at first. He didn't connect her to the emergency, to the blood, to the life he had unknowingly saved. When he finally understood, when the truth reached him, his reaction wasn't pride or anger. It was quiet relief. Relief that someone else's child would go home. Relief that pain hadn't won that day. That was all. That humility changed something in her that no lecture ever could. Recovery gave her time to think, to watch, to listen. She began noticing the people she had once ignored: the nurses who stayed late, the janitors who worked through the night, the parents who slept in chairs beside hospital beds. The world was full of unseen heroes, and she had been blind to them. When she returned to her life, she didn't return the same. Power still surrounded her, but now it felt like a responsibility instead of a right. She sought him out, not to erase guilt, but to understand. She learned his story in pieces, learned how loss can hollow you and love can still survive inside the emptiness. She saw how his daughter clung to him like he was the safest place in the world, and she realized that wealth had never bought her anything that pure. Change didn't come in grand speeches or dramatic gestures. It came quietly. A promotion he didn't ask for, medical bills that disappeared without explanation, opportunities that arrived just when he was ready to give up, and always respect, real respect, the kind that looks someone in the eye and sees them fully. For him, life didn't suddenly become easy, but it became lighter. Being seen does that. Being valued does that. And for her, redemption wasn't about fixing the past. It was about honoring it by becoming better. Years later, when their paths crossed again, the elevator ride felt different. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full of understanding, of gratitude, of a shared moment that had changed both their lives forever. Two people from different worlds, connected by something as simple and profound as blood. Some stories remind us that heroes don't always wear uniforms, and kindness doesn't need an audience. Sometimes the smallest acts carry the greatest power, and the people we overlook are the ones holding the world together in quiet ways we rarely notice. If this story moved you, if it reminded you to look closer, to be kinder, to remember that every person carries a story you can't see, then let that feeling stay with you. Let it guide how you treat the next stranger you meet. And if you believe stories like this matter, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because the world needs more reminders that compassion still exists and that it can change everything.